halacha in the real world. In other words, looking at issues in the real world from a Torah perspective. I'm not talking about hashkafa or philosophy in terms of the more classical understandings of mitzvot. Obviously it comes up in our discussions, Shabbos and kashrus and so forth. But the fact is that there are certain issues that emerge from the world. See, when you have an issue in kashrus or Shabbos, it's created by the Torah, because the whole entity is created by the Torah. If the Torah did not create a prohibition of non-kosher meat, there would not be an issue of kashrus. So Torah creates the whole issue and the whole discussion. But there are other things, like for example, a marriage. Marriage exists throughout the world. For some reason, humanity came to an idea that there should be couplings and groupings. We could give arguments. Well, it was natural, or because you needed to have someone to raise the children. You needed to have a clarity who the father is. Therefore, women should not be open to promiscuity, because we'll never know who the father is. And also this kind of attitude leads, and also women wish to mate with a man and have developed some type of connection, because this way she is protected while she is pregnant and in the early years of the child. Now, this is the way the world talks, but the fact is that therefore they have the reasons for constitutes of marriage and family and so on and so forth. So the Torah has its own statement about that. And in that regard, when the Torah has its own statement, it's being clear and say, okay, this is a statement, and therefore the Torah is discussing something that's in the world. So that's a very different perspective. And that's what I like to do. I like to focus on those issues. Real issues, and see what the Torah perspective is. So I said that I would open up in terms of the shir with questions at first, and then we'll get into a topic. Now, if a question develops, such as the question on how to relate to non-Orthodox denominations, I said, okay, so maybe we'll devote a whole shir to it and put that off in the future. But today I'm again throwing out the question. It's sort of like if anyone has a specific issue they want to talk about. Okay, anyone? No? No one is voicing something. Okay, so let me tell you a question that is on my mind. And, I'll give a second for Donald and Cheryl to write in something, maybe? Okay? No? Donald, differences in what? Differences in what? I'm interested in the differences in between the two types of mitzvot. Okay, between mitzvot that when the Torah discusses an issue versus the Torah creating an issue. Is that what you mean, Donald? Okay, and Cheryl, you want to talk about Norway? It's understandable. So Torah perspective on Norway. It's a big problem. The Norway issue. Okay, so we'll deal with that. Okay, so Donald, you'd like to deal with Cheryl's question about Norway. Okay, so is there a Torah question involved with Norway? Let's put it that way. There's a Jewish question, because there's some aspects of a Jewish question, because it seems that the right wing in Europe are also perceived to be pro-Israel, and that raises an interesting issue, in the sense that it's almost like the enemy, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That kind of attitude. And the truth is a lot of the right-wing parties in Israel, in Europe, against Islamic influences and so forth, is are pro-Israel, and that creates an issue in the sense that, there is issue. There's clearly a Jewish issue. This is really a issue. Cheryl, you're absolutely correct. Cheryl writes here, I worry that his attacks on liberals and his opposition to Islamism will harm the point of view that supports Israel and opposes Islamism. That's true. The fact is when a person does something like this, there's a natural tendency to have a negative feeling about the person, and you're already hearing statements he's a Zionist and so forth. And therefore there's a Jewish issue. But before we get to the Jewish issue, we want to look at the Torah issue. Is there a Torah issue? Okay, now what do I mean by that? Okay, so this person goes and kills. Obviously it's against the Torah for any person to kill. On the 7 mitzvahs by Noach and the Noachite code, this is clearly prohibited. Okay, so we have to see this person as being prohibited, as doing an act that was wrong. That's not the issue here. What really is going on here? I think from a sort of further in-depth issue from a Torah perspective, and I think that I want to define somewhat of an issue of how we are to look at the world. See, in a certain way, we are witnessing, in the case of Islam and right-wingers and so forth, a reaction by one group to a foreign value system. And we have to be very careful with that, because we have to recognize that we have been in that situation in the past. So when we're looking at this over here like this, we're sitting there and saying, okay, these people, the Europeans, they're having a strong reaction against Muslims, and basically they're saying, listen, this is our culture, don't influence our culture. That's really what they're saying. Our culture, we don't want you influencing our culture. That seems to be the right-wing attitude in Europe. Basically, we want to live this way. We let you into the country. We thought you'd be good, appreciate that, and good citizens like that. In other words, you adopt our value system. You obviously are not adopting our value system, and we want you out. That's one way of looking at this. And it's not just about, because in our world today, now the truth is there is a certain aspect of some aspect of racism, because the nation is not like America or Canada. In the nations in Europe, each nation, basically the populace, what we call the national populace, has been there for years, and so forth and so forth. In Canada, the United States, we came from all over the world. Okay, so the point is that really, in many ways, multiculturalism, tolerance in America, and so forth, we're willing to accept anyone from anywhere in terms of their national perspective. However, really, there's an aspect that we're willing to give in, as long as you sort of fit into our society and our societal values. In other words, I expressed this to someone today. I said, listen, if you want to be tolerant and say, listen, we're going to have our borders open here, and we're going to let all the people from anywhere in Asia come over to Canada, and we'll take you in. And then all these people come in, and all of a sudden they become 51% of the population, and they say, okay, we don't want you guys playing hockey anymore. I'm giving you a ludicrous example. We want the culture now to speak Chinese, right? We'd sit there, wait a second, we let you in, but we want you to respect our culture. We want you to respect our perspective, and we want you not to affect our society. We're concerned you're going to affect our society, and that's an interesting issue. Because at that point in time, you might start saying, "Gee, I understand that. I understand that the Europeans say, listen, we have a certain culture, and we'll let you in, but please keep our culture." I'm not talking about imposition. I'm not talking about intolerance, but don't try and change us. Like don't try and make us start adopting a different perspective. Okay. In other words, you come into our land, but don't try telling us that all women have to now cover their faces. Okay, and if you win 50% of the vote, we won't appreciate that. The fact is you can understand the Europeans saying, we don't like that. We don't like that. Okay? It challenges sort of some simplistic understanding of democracy, but we do understand that as we want to be opening and so forth, that we don't want you that we have some rights also. Okay. Now the truth is that in Switzerland, for example, where they have very strict immigration laws, no one was ever upset with that, because that's what they did. They said, listen, the way we're going to protect our culture is we have very, very strong immigration laws. And it was very hard to get into Switzerland. Okay, but now that they let all these people in, that's where you see this tension. We let them in because we believe in democracy and tolerance and so forth, but they're not accepting what we thought they would accept, which is to adopt our culture. Now, in a certain way, that shows an aspect of ethnocentricity. I think a lot of the reasons Europe is in this situation is because there is clearly an attitude that that people had, that if you what do you call it? If you're going to come into Europe, you're for sure going to buy this culture. It's obviously better than any other culture. So they expected all these people coming from, North Africa and other countries and so forth to say, listen, we all expected them we all expected them to adopt our culture because we have such a fine culture, and now we're shocked they're not adopting our culture. Okay, and that's part of the issue. Now you're right. The show's running a point when they infringe on our rights, but the fact is that's exactly it. There's the point where we are concerned about that, but the point is that they start getting 51% of the population, then in democracy, majority rules. So think like this, and think like this. It's like if I let in all the Chinese into Canada and they want to change the rules so Chinese becomes the dominant language in Canada, well, democratically they voted it in. So, let's say, what's the problem with that? Well, that's where you get constitutional issues and so forth, but you say, wait a second, we let you in as a guest into our, it's like I let you into my house, but please don't take over my house, right? So the point is that there is some kind of aspect of that. Okay, but the Europeans were never concerned with that, and that's where you put in certain immigration rules. But one of the things that happens is they thought people would buy it. See, what happens in Europe is not just the concern about this, but they actually thought that it wouldn't be an issue because people would love being European. We got a better culture, we have a better way of doing things. All these people will come over from other cultures and they'll all buy it. And who had that theory also? George W. Bush in Iraq. He basically said, okay, we'll go over there, we'll give everyone democracy, and these people will buy it, And if they buy it, then it'll be really great, but they'll buy it, right? And then they'll all, and then we'll have another market, so forth. But then he ran into this world where people no longer bought it. And he's like, well, we came there, we're offering him democracy, and they turn around and saying, no, we like what we had. We don't think you're the best culture. And that's a problem. Okay? Now, what does this have to do with Torah? Because what I've just described was the problem of the diaspora. It's really a problem of Galus. And really was the issue of Galus. Okay? And a lot of times we don't recognize that. Okay? Okay, and Shel gives an example of no seeing-eye dogs, and he could do it in the majority. Right. Right. Okay. Okay. By the way, Donald, your point is well taken. What point do we, the majority, take action to stop it? That's right, because it's our place right now. We want to put a limit and maintain our culture, but we let them in. The point is we let them in. But the reason we let so many in is because we believe that they're going to like our culture. They're going to see the benefits of, for example, you have seeing-eye dogs. And lo and behold, we're shocked. We let in all the people, and we thought, hey, they'd see the benefits of seeing-eye dogs and so forth and so forth. And they're sitting there and saying, still, we don't want any dogs around. Good example. Okay? Okay? That. By the way, Cheryl, exactly what you're saying is really on point here. That if you have freedoms, it's a freedom that if you just give rights to everyone, it's a problem of the new culture coming in and changing the basic freedoms that you have. Okay. By the way, the seeing-eye dog is real. I mean, the fact is, I understand that dog. It is real. Okay. So I want to tell you that's really the story of the Galus, and that's what a lot of Jews don't recognize. See, because you have to understand this aspect of what we call anti-Semitism. Now, I look at the Europeans and say, obviously, and this is not justifying what this guy did in Norway, but you see that the right-wing Europeans, we sort of see a little bit of their viewpoint is what you guys are saying. Hey, wait a second, they have a culture and they want to maintain their culture. It's sort of their way of life for centuries and so forth. They want to maintain it, so that's great, and that's their culture and so forth. And so we see sort of their viewpoint. But the strange thing is, and this is what was so powerful, is that issue was one of the issues of Galus. Let's take the Spanish expulsion. Okay, one of the sad days in Jewish history. Tisha B'Av 1492, wherein the Jews basically had to be out of Spain. And what was Torquemada's real argument? Okay, so Torquemada's was saying, by the way, I'm not trying to justify this guy in any way, shape, or form. What I'm trying to say is you have to understand this is what the right wing think, and this guy's an extreme like that, and in a certain way we look at it and say, well, we understand a little bit of the viewpoint, not to go kill people, the viewpoint, but then we have to look at it from a Jewish perspective and understand that was our problem throughout the Galus. Torquemada in Spain basically said, when he said get rid of the Jews, I want the Jews out of Spain, his argument was because Spain was a Catholic country. I want a Catholic culture. I don't want people, who are going to affect the culture of Catholicism. That was his argument. He said, listen, we want to have this kind of society, and these people are not going to add to our society. Okay? That was his argument. Because they don't share our values. And that is an interesting problem that we have as Jews. Working in the Galus is really the question of how do we live in a foreign culture. And the other side of it was, okay, and now Cheryl's saying over here, we weren't trying to alter the Catholic norms, okay? The point is Torquemada was concerned that they would. And the truth is that there are two ways that we could possibly alter the Catholic norms. A, they might be afraid that we actually would try proselytizing. B, just our very presence could put a pressure on the dominant culture. Now, let me be clear about this. I'm not giving arguments to justify it. Torquemada was one of the great Rishonim in history. This is not an argument. It's it's trying to understand what the real argument of Rishus is. Sometimes we look at evil and give such simple arguments, and we want people to be simple. We want to have such simple arguments. The guy's a pig. The guy's a violent, hedonistic pig, and that's what evil is, and so forth and so forth. Or he just hates Jews, or he just hates that. The fact is, there's a lot of subtlety there, and once you look at a lot of subtlety, you sit there and say, okay, so what's the issue? Torquemada's argument was we don't want to have an entity in our midst that will undermine our goals for society. Now, would Jews in a Catholic society be an entity in this that could undermine it? Yes, because they are people who, by very definition, did not accept the values of the society. The Jew, by very definition, stands for, I don't believe in what you believe in. That's what they do. And by the fact that they're operating in society, basically you can say, hey, here's someone out there who's basically not supporting our society. So there's two issues here. Okay? And from a Jewish perspective, so how do we live in that world? You see, Cheryl, you asked the question, what about our shared civil values? Don't forget, that's relatively modern, 1700s. And that's a new issue today. You know, we're beginning to see that these shared civil values, it's not so simple anymore. Look, same-sex marriages, potential bans on circumcision in San Francisco. Why? Because it's contrary to a civil value. How could you do something to a child without his permission? It's an imposition of your value. And the civil value says, gee, is that molestation? Well, the point is that it's not just about, a lot of people make the mistake that it was not just about we want to persecute, or we want to forcibly convert you, which obviously was part of the concept of Spanish expulsion. There was a way to try and get try to force Jews to convert. But the fact is, it was a way to say, hey, listen, we don't want you affecting our society. And the reality is we would affect that society. You take another example, Luther. Luther, when he started his attack on the Catholic Church, well known, he was trying to be friendly to Jews and love the Jews and so on and so forth, because he thought that the Jews would join him in his attack upon Catholicism. Then he became a violent anti-Semite. Totally, a really a real attack on anti-Semitism, a real remarkable incident, because he was actually angered because the Jews did not support him. So he said, wait a second, here's people, and they're against me also. I don't want them around. They're going to influence negatively. Donald, you're asking another question. If Christianity came from Judaism, as Christian claims, then how can our civil values be so different? Donald, keep that question online for next week. Okay? The problem is the terms Judaism and Christianity. Okay? How many Judaisms were there at the time of early Christianity? Our understanding of Judaism is Pharisaic Judaism, which we understand to be Orthodox Judaism, but the truth is, at the time of Christianity, early Christianity, there were other forms of Judaism. There's a lot of arguments that the Christians really came out of the Essenes. Okay, so that's one argument. So the fact is what do you mean when it came out of Judaism? Second of all, another argument is the fact that there is a manipulation of Judaism by Christianity to make it in line with other things. In other words, it wasn't a pure development of Jewish values. It was people seeing some Jewish values and then interpreting them pursuant to other values, and so forth. Anyway, let's talk about that maybe in the future. So that's a new topic. The idea of Judeo-Christianity, which I have tremendous problems with. So Donald, keep that in mind for a future week. Okay, okay. But the fact is, you're right. But the question is it's not we're not living in Christian values. We're living in post-Christian values. We're living in secular values. And the fact is, the secular values are contrary to Judaism. And how do we live with these values? You see, the fact is that we, by definition, and there's people who are very angry, like who say religion should not be a defense for having a negative attitude for same-sex marriages. They compare religions who are against same-sex marriages to the Southern Baptists in the South before the Civil War, who felt that slavery was mandated by the Bible. So I've heard someone actually say that. Yeah, we should not give religions a permission to be racist against gays. In the same way, we would never allow religions to be racist against blacks and or more pro-slavery. But what I'm getting at is we have an interesting dilemma as Jews. We stand for something. We live in a world that holds of a value system that's different than ours. Let's take back when we lived in the Catholic Europe. Okay. So think back. We live in a world. So how are we to relate? On one hand, by standing by our values, we are going to be somewhat of a threat to the dominant culture. Now, what you're saying is Muslims are much more openly in that threat. They want to be a threat. They want to attack. Maybe we just be a little bit docile and not be involved. And that happens to be a very important aspect of a Jewish perspective. But on the other hand, our very presence is going to, in certain ways, challenge the dominant culture. Let's say in Catholicism. By definition, there's a group of people who don't think this guy is anything. I mean, people don't recognize this, and it's a very hard statement for people to recognize. In not believing in Jesus, we are basically saying that this man was wrong. If he actually walked around saying that he was special, that he was a liar, so we're taking their divinity and saying, no, he was a little meshuggah, right? Like you take Paul, okay? If you forget about a lot of Jews say, no, Jesus didn't say anything. I don't know, but take Paul. He's walking around and saying, this is the truth. We're saying the guy's wrong. He's lying. So we're taking the person they consider to be one of the holiest people in the world and saying, no, the guy was a liar. Or he was psychotic, or he had a trip. On the trip to Damascus, he was on a little bit of a trip. Good smoke, right? Now you think about that. By the very definition, hi, I believe in this, this, and this, and you say, and I say, no, I don't believe in that. Well, this holy person said that. Well, I think he was wrong, but he was so holy. No, I think he was a little bit of sugar. I mean, you have to understand, our very presence challenges it. Okay? If you take this stuff seriously. So, anyways, let's go a little bit beyond that. Anyways, but the fact is, how do our presence that? But it's an interesting thing that most Jews don't recognize. Is that so? We say, okay, we have to be as minimal of a disruptive viewpoint. And that might have been the idea that Jews did not want, had to be, accepted to be good citizens, and we didn't try disrupting things. Now the truth is, though, is that there are classic concepts in Torah that we are supposed to be somewhat disruptive. You take Avram Avinu. We all know Avram Avinu who broke the idols, right? Broke Nimrod's idols. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we have an aspect of going in there and standing for our principle. Avram Avinu, me Hashem, I stand for God, and so forth. So in a certain way, we do stand for something. So in a certain way, we're going to say to exist in this dominant society, we're not going to be so adamant. Well, how can we do that? How do we justify that from a Torah perspective? How do we understand it? But does it really work? Can we hold that position? There's another interesting aspect of it, though, that a lot of Jews don't recognize. At the same time that we say, listen, we have to get along with this, we don't recognize that people in the dominant society actually become upset by the fact that we don't stand for something. I remember this a long time ago, a few years ago. I was speaking in Providence, Rhode Island, and I had a little bit of an open question. And the guy in shul said, Rabbi, years ago we had a Protestant minister speak to us. He basically told us off. He says, I don't get it. How come you guys don't proselytize? We Jews always talk about, how great it is we don't proselytize. We don't recognize that many non-Jews consider that to be insulting. If you believe you have the truth, why aren't you sharing it? Why aren't you trying and giving me? If you think you have something good for me, why aren't you doing it? In other words, let's fix it out. If you have the cure for cancer, why aren't you sharing it? Why aren't you why keeping it only for yourselves? So if you really think it's a truth, shouldn't you go out there and share it with people? Yeah, but if we start sharing it, we start causing a lot of disruption. So how do we live with that? Okay? And that's really the issue. Okay? Now, the truth is, shall you correctly point out, is very real. Okay. That it was much worse years ago, but this is the problem of tolerance, working with tolerance. How do you stand for yourself? The truth is, nowadays we're willing to accept opposing arguments a little bit more, and we're willing to have a little bit of these issues. But tolerance seems to imply we have some openness to communication. It's very interesting. I'm just looking at this. Cheryl, you said your comment on Nishma is this regards provocative. I think you're viewing to the fact, it just by coincidence on the Nishma website, we have something up in the Torah View in Christianity. Every day, by the way, we have something new on the website directing you to a certain aspect of the website. This article, this thing, or some other things. A new shear on KosherTube, a new article in the Tribune. I mean, a lot of things. So this thing over here, it just happens to be this week. I didn't plan it. Like, this is just we have a research section on the website, and we've done a little bit of stuff on how the Torah view of Christianity. So I mean, that's all part of it, But the fact is, this is part of the issue. So the truth is that what you're seeing in Europe, in certain ways, reflects the attitude that we had to deal with in Gullus. And not as badly in certain ways, because, in certain ways it was worse, in certain ways not worse. You see, nowadays, back then, the dominant society was more interested in attacking us. Tolerance wasn't a value. So 500 years ago, there was no argument we should be nice and tolerant to these people, welcome in multicultural and so forth. No, this is good. Being Christian is good. These people are bad. They're not Christians. But there was concern that these people would influence the society. And our response had to be, well, one second, maybe we won't. We'll try not to. But on a certain hand, that was a challenge to us, because we should stand by our principles. So how do we, we're not going to disrupt you, but on the other hand, we believe in what we believe in. And sadly, there is going to be effects. That's why, by the way, a lot of people get the impression we're talking about conversion and so forth. Everyone talks about how Jews don't convert. I told this story about this minister who said, why don't you don't convert? A lot of people think that it's inherent in Torah not to be active proselyters. It's not true. There are certain hesitations in terms of becoming a Yid, but it's not so simple that Jews should not promote the 7 Noahide laws. Okay? I'm not saying everyone says there is, but it's not so simple that the issue of proselytizing the 7 Noahide laws. There are people who say we should be doing that. The Rambam, for example, says that. The Lubavitcher Rebbe held that way. Other people have questions on it. Supposedly, your Moshe says is an Indian, but your first objective has to be toward Jews. But anyways, but that's something different. But the point is that Avram Avinu was the uniqueness of Avram Avinu, that he went out there and tried to get people to believe in God. So we stand for something. So the truth is the reason we don't convert or we don't proselyte, whatever, is actually may be a factor of Christian Europe, because if you converted people, you put the community in danger. Now, if someone became a Yid, it's quite possible the person who converted would get killed, would be executed, and there would be a tremendous punishment on the Jewish community for converting a Christian to Judaism. Same way as Afghanistan. Remember, Afghanistan, there was a guy who was Muslim who became a Christian, and they were going to execute him, right? And America stepped in, and the guy got a green card, went to America, right? There was a whole big thing and so forth. So wait, what do you think happened in Europe? Okay, in Christian Europe, exactly that. If you converted a Christian, right, it's quite possible the Christian would get executed and the Jewish community would get punished harshly. So therefore we had sort of a reluctant movement towards conversion. But but the truth is living in a dominant society is really an interesting issue. I look at Muslims coming over to Europe, and if you believe in what you believe in, you're going to be adamant about it and argue for it. I'm not talking about, there's another issue of what they believe in, and the radicalism and the violence and so forth and so forth. But that's another issue and so forth. But the fact is, if you believe in something, you're going to be you're going to be doing it. But the issue of the Gullus is how we lived in a dominant society. Now, the truth is one of the big differences is generally this Gullus happened in monotheistic countries, right? Islam or Christianity. So the tension wasn't as much on us. In a certain way, okay, because of the Shem Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, because we believe that we have a different obligation than non-Jews, but what basically it should be universal monotheism, universal acceptance of the one God. In a certain way, we could be more non-challenging by living in Christianity. In other words, we can sit there and say, listen, for these people it's wonderful. They're following the 7 Noahide laws. This is great. Okay? And therefore you see from a lot of sources that had sort of a more positive outlook of living in the Gullus, because they basically believe that the world around them, the Christian world around them, the Muslim world around them, even with the persecution and so forth, at least they believed in one God. So we don't have to be as adamant about the uniqueness of our Torah perspective, because the Torah says we don't have to be so adamant when we're dealing with non-Jews. They're okay with just the Shem Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. So they don't have to know every detail of the true theology. And it's very, very interesting how in Christian Europe and also in Muslim countries, Jews developed a halakhically based tolerance to the dominant society. Basically, they sort of say, hey, listen, we don't have to treat them like Ovdei Avodah Zarah. We don't have to treat them like idolaters. Idolaters, we have to smash idols. Avram Avinu smashed idols. It's not the situation here. They're not really like idolaters. See, a lot of people in Christian Europe talking like that. There are a lot of Gedolim talk that way about Christianity. They're not idolaters. Therefore, we don't have to be in their face, okay, about this. Therefore, we can be a little bit laid back. But the reality is we were a potential threat to the church. We were, but just our very being was. So you begin to understand that there was concern that we would influence the society, and therefore, and now we hear people saying, yes, we're concerned about being influenced society, and in a certain way the Torah respected other nations. There's in a certain way Torah respects other nations' cultures. You know, like Norway has its own culture, that nation has this culture. We're not in favor of Avodah Zarah, but their own culture is fine for them, but not for us to adopt that culture. So we live with a certain tension in a diaspora world. By very definition, we're living with tension, because we're tense with the dominant culture. Anyways, I'm just giving a perspective here of viewing what's happening here in the world, and you're beginning to see certain aspects of how we've lived for the last 2,000 years. Yeah, you have the extreme guy like today, like the guy who went on a rampage. You know, crazy. So back to 500 years ago, that was Torquemada. The dominant people were like, this guy here, kill the Jews. You know, they did that in the, you know, Torquemada al-Islam. That's what is there. So now they say only one guy. But the truth is that as you sit there and understand and say, okay, he was wrong, but I understand why people get a little bit upset about these things and so forth and so forth. Begin to understand the challenge that we faced, and how we had to be somewhat concerned that we weren't too disruptive, because we're living in their world. Something to think about. Okay? Maintaining our viewpoints in their world. Something to think about. It's not so simple. Okay? Okay. Anyways, I'll see if there's any further questions here. Okay? Any further questions here? Okay. Oh yes, I see someone's writing a question here. Well, I'll give up the mic for a second, see if someone has something to say. We've now taken the mic away from these people. I mean, we're seeing someone at the virtual yeshiva wants to speak. Okay, so I stopped talking into the mic that I'm holding here, right? Okay. Now, they're not hearing this, but only you guys on Kosher will be hearing this. Okay. Okay, let's go. Hi, okay. So Cheryl has a question. Do you think that Jews still face this matter of maintaining our viewpoints in their world in post-Christian America? Yeah, that's exactly it. That's what people. The circumcision issue is exactly that, right? They have a value, and now the truth is that I'm not saying that every person involved, you know, against circumcision is doesn't have, you know. I'm not. I think there are anti-Semites, clear anti-Semites who just say, hey, let's get the Jews. I'm not saying there aren't. And not only that, I know that there's Jews involved against circumcision because for some reason they're upset that they were circumcised. They have their own mishigas. But the fact is that in our society, look at what happens. You know, touching your child, and you know, there's restrictions on anything, and the idea that you are doing a non-medically mandated procedure on your child. Well, a lot of people say, hey, wait a second, that's really contrary to our society. And we are saying, no, wait a second, we have to maintain our viewpoints. Yeah, we're saying we have to stand by our values. Israel is a similar issue. Donald asked, what about in Israel? Similar issue. People don't recognize that a lot of the battle is over what the values of Israel should be. Okay? Now, Christian, and you know, Penny Lane makes a point here. Christian circumcision males too, yes, but there's issues on that also. Muslims do also. That's the issue. But if you say, hey, but you're not adamantly demanding it. Christians who circumcise their males, usually it's because the doctor thinks it's a good idea. Okay? Okay, Cheryl wants to ask something on the mic. Okay, so we'll do this. Penny, you're right, but you didn't do it because it was a religiously mandated thing, right? You did it because your doctor thought it was a good thing to do, and medically and so forth. It wasn't mandated. The argument now is that people are saying it's not medically mandated anymore. Okay, Cheryl wants to say something, so I'm going to give up the mic.
Oh, okay. Oh, yep, you do hear me. Let me shut my camera off. Oops. Okay, thank you, Penny. Rabbi, I was reading an article today. It was written by a woman named Michelle Goldberg. She says, she's talking about why American Jews more frequently vote Democrat than Republican. And that she foresees that staying the same in the future. One of the things that she writes is, where is this section? I just had it. Extra time. Okay, here we go. American Jews have shown again and again that they care more about social justice and a defense of American pluralism than a zealous defense of Israeli maximalism. They might get anxious about liberal criticism of Israel, but this anxiety tends to pale beside their abhorrence of the Christian right. And it really made me wonder whether this abhorrence of the Christian right that she sees is still really is necessary or appropriate or reasonable currently. Certainly the matter of circumcision and of gay marriage, these things which are opposed to the Jewish values don't come from the Christian right. So I just would like to know what your thoughts might be about that. Donald, she doesn't. I think she may later go into different voting patterns of non-Orthodox compared to Orthodox Jews, but nevertheless, I think that she sees I think that whether there are differences in Orthodox versus non-Orthodox voting patterns, I think that it still holds by and large that there is this, which she says, abhorrence of the Christian right among American Jews, whether Orthodox or not. I hope that's clear. Thanks. Mike free.
Cheryl, I'm going to ask you to hold on to that question. So that's another question for a future Sherry. See, inherent in this is a question of what are the Jewish values that we have passed on throughout the centuries. Okay? And Donald, you're right, but the fact is I'm not just talking from I'm not talking just from the Orthodox perspective, I'm talking from what are Jewish values. And maybe that's a little bit, I personally have a problem, and I think I've mentioned to you guys many times, with the use of the generic term Jewish or Judaism. Because you take a spectrum of people and it means something totally different to all of them. Okay? Okay? What you're asking is, extent Jewish values are threatened by Christian America? Well, there are Jews out there, yes, because of the way they understand Jewish values. And what you're really questioning is what are the values of the Jewish community? And what you have to say is it's pluralistic. See, one of the difficulties of many people, and I'm going to get to this and so forth, is that when you take people who are leftists or who are, let's say, anti-Israel to a certain extent, I mean, not totally not totally anti-Israel, but have generally more liberal viewpoints in Israel. What a lot of people don't recognize, I like to say, you see, these are self-hating Jews and so forth and so forth. What a lot of people don't recognize is these are people who believe that they're expressing Jewish values. They really believe they're expressing Jewish values, like strong Jewish values, and they would argue it's their Jewishness that's pushing them to adopt these perspectives, which include the Christian right, and some challenges against Israel and so forth and so forth. Okay. Now, the fact is that you got to look at where do the values come from, and Cheryl, they're not really comparable to Neturei Karta, which I think you're thinking about, but they're coming out of a certain perspective. And how you doing, Eddie? I think we have to have a talk of trying to understand the broader perspective of these Jewish values and the concern. But there's no doubt about it. There's something people. I once wrote an article, in fact, on the, I don't know if it's on the website or not, but there was an article I wrote about Jews for Jesus, and that what really is the problem a lot of people, that really underlying bothers Jews about Jews for Jesus, because don't forget, all these Jews are pluralistic. They'll accept, atheist Jews. Hi, I'm a Jew, but I don't believe in God. Okay, you can be part of the UJA. You can be president of the UJA. We don't care. There's even, you have Judists, Juddhist. Yeah, I'm a Buddhist practitioner and I'm Jewish. Hey, that's cool. We like that, philosophy. Comes to Christianity, oh no. This is anti-Jewish. That's why a lot of people, what's the one theological basis of Judaism? You don't believe in Jesus. Hi, well, tell me, what is Judaism? We don't believe in Jesus. Why? So the truth is you have to understand that the Christians were the enemies for a millennia. They were the persecutors of Jews. Okay? The fact is that, so therefore, of course, there's a very hard time for many Jews to accept sharing a platform with Christians, because these Christians were the one who persecuted us for a millennia. Anyways, but let's deal with that in the future. Okay, so so now I got three things along. Donald or Cheryl or anyone, keep these three topics in line into the future. Okay, so one of them is relationship with non-Jewish denominations. One is Cheryl's topic of Jews and the modern Jewish values and the Christian right, and the other one was Donald's topic, and that was, I'm sorry, Donald, that was, let's go back. I gotta try to remember this. I'm terrible. My memory is terrible. Donald, what was your topic? Okay. Christianity came from Judaism. So how can our civil values be different? So talking about the relationship of Judaism to Christianity. Okay, so let's do that in the future. Okay, is that all right? Okay. In the meantime, it's time now to call it a night.